Alrighty, I am pleased to be joined by a reoccurring guest, Deji Andrews of the Baseball Connection podcast. How's it going, Deji?
I'm doing well. How are you, JJ?
I am doing good. Again, thanks for coming on a kind of a late notice. Actually, before we start talking about the World Series, if you want to talk more about your podcast, there's probably a lot of people that know about it, but if you just want to talk about it, anything in store for the future, what you've been talking about lately, I'm assuming you've been talking about the World Series, but just kind of give a quick detail of your podcast.
Yeah, so Baseball Connection is just a daily baseball podcast where we just talk mostly current events. I mean, now that, we will likely be wrapping up the World Series soon, we'll move into the offseason. We'll do hot stove, trade rumors. We'll do a recap. Every year I'll do a recap that covers every single team. So I'll do each of the 30 teams and like what they did well, what their offseason looks like, what their outlook is for the following season. And I'll do that like every team throughout the league. And then we'll also just do, the regular trade rumors and signings and things like that right up until spring training. And then we'll do it all again with the season.
All righty. Yeah. Again, don't forget to check out his podcast, the Baseball Connection podcast. Again, all the links will be down in the description below. And of course, keep in mind, this is recording right before Game 5. So if the Astros or if the Braves do end up winning this series, and the series is done by the time this comes out, just to be kind of warn you guys. So again, the World Series has been interesting. The Braves currently have a 3-1 series lead. What have you thought about the World Series so far?
It's been good. I definitely do think it's been a bit of a surprise to me. I didn't think that the Astros bats would be this cold. At least, they did win a game in Houston, but since the series moved to Atlanta, their bats have been cold. And, it's, as you know, with sports, there are two narratives to every story. If you're an Astros fan, it's like, oh, our bats are really cold, they need to wake up. If you're a Braves fan, it's like, oh, our pitching is really good and we're doing a great job. And for those of us who aren't like myself, who aren't necessarily rooting for either team, I definitely do think it's a bit of both, but I would lean towards saying that the Astros bats are struggling because there are key players in that lineup, like Alex Bregman, for instance. Where has he been this whole postseason, not just the World Series? So when you have guys in that lineup, basically their core guys minus Jordan Alvarez, Correa hit a little bit early in the postseason. He hasn't done much since then. Bregman has been cold. Gurriel has been missing. So when you see that extended over multiple series, then you're like, okay, this is a problem with the offense. Not to take anything away from the Braves pitching, but there's definitely something wrong with the Houston offense right now.
Yeah, and I think for the first two games, it was kind of the complete opposite. I think the Braves won 6-2 in game one, and then the Astros won 7-2. So it was completely opposite. But ever since we went to Atlanta, as you were mentioning, the Astros haven't been able to get much hitting going. I think it was 3-2 last night on Saturday night. I can't remember the score on Friday night. It was like 2-0 or something like that. But yeah, definitely the Braves have been able to do it. They're doing a solid job of shutting down the Astros. Did you expect that both these teams would be in the World Series, or were you shocked that both teams are actually in it right now?
I'm shocked to an extent about the Astros because I kind of thought that, well, if we go way back, I thought Tampa Bay would come out of the American League. Red Sox upset them, and then it was really close. And I was like, wow, this is a Red Sox team that's getting hot at the right time. And honestly, during that Red Sox-Astros series, it looked like Boston was going to win. Astros came back. So I'm not too shocked that the Astros made it out of the AL, but I'm very shocked that the Braves won that National League pennant. I'm very shocked. I thought the National League was going to be another Dodgers, running through everyone. Not that they ran through everyone last year. They did have some adversity on the way, but here we are. The Atlanta Braves won the National League pennant, and this is despite losing Ronald Acuna Jr., despite losing Mike Soroka, despite actually some people might not even remember losing Marcell Ozuna due to some off-the-field issues earlier in the season, and here they are.
Yeah, and that whole NL East was not very good this year. And, the Braves, I think at one point, the Braves weren't leading in the division. I can't remember when they started taking the lead, but they definitely were off to a slow start. So, yeah, the Braves, I thought it was either going to be the Giants or Dodgers. And then, of course, the American League, I was with you. I thought the Rays would win, but they unfortunately aren't in. It's the Braves and Astros. So I'm a little shocked as you are, but I don't know. I'm a little shocked that I'm more shocked that the Dodgers and Giants didn't get in than the Rays. But we'll see what happens next year. So what do you think? let me try to rephrase this again. What do you think we'll see in Game 5? And if the Astros are, or actually, let me rephrase that again. What do the Astros need to do on Sunday night and the rest of the series to win this series over the Braves?
They need to hit the ball. They need to hit the ball. I haven't looked at the lineups yet, but I know after last night's game, a lot of people were whispering, oh, should they move Bregman down in the order? That might do something. It might not. I don't really know who they're going to replace him with down there that is hitting the ball right now that could jumpstart their offense. So they're just going to have to hit the ball. And their pitching throughout this postseason has been on and off. Like they get good pitching when they need it. Like the Astros have been getting good pitching when they need it. And then if it's a game they don't need to win, sometimes they'll just have a really short outing, like 2 innings for the starter or something like that. So for what we'll see tonight, it's anyone's guess. But I will say, though, the home cooking for the Braves, there's something in the water there in Atlanta. Eddie Rosario can't seem to get out. He's on pace. I think if this series extends to, 6 or even 7 games, he could have the major league record for most hits in a World Series. I think he's 2 behind the record right now, and who knows what's going to happen tonight. But yeah, he's on fire right now.
Yeah, that's crazy. And yeah, I believe he was the NLCS MVP, wasn't he?
He was.
Yeah, I was going to say, because in the American League it was Jordan Alvarez, but yeah. Okay, so that is interesting though. But what do you think the Braves? Do you think the Braves win on Sunday night? And if they don't win on Sunday night, who do you think ends up winning the series?
I'm not good at predictions, but I'll go ahead and oblige. I do think the Braves will win on Sunday night. I think they will. They just have so much momentum, and they're playing at home. For some reason, they play really well there. And I mentioned this on my podcast a lot, that I noticed with the Braves, if you look back at that Dodgers series, they took an early lead in like every game, maybe all but one game. They took an early lead in that series. Even when they would have like a heartbreaking loss one night, they would come right back and they'd be ready to play. They'd like turn the page, they'd be ready to play, and they would take an early lead the next game. Sometimes they would keep it. I mean, obviously they ended up winning that series. So I've noticed that the Braves know how to strike first, which is definitely important, especially with as good as their bullpen is. If they can strike first, get an early lead, they have such a lights out bullpen, at least right now. These guys are hot. You have Tyler Matzik, Will Smith, et cetera, et cetera. Those guys are really locking things down at the back end of the pen. So if they can get an early lead, 5-6 innings, we could be seeing World Series champions tonight.
Yeah. And if the Braves do end up winning on Sunday night, and if they end up winning the series, who do you think is the MVP?
I think it'd be Eddie Rosario. Because he's just continued his hot streak. And yeah, I think it would be him. But I mean, it's possible somebody else. Maybe we see big games then again, that's assuming they win tonight, like on Sunday night. If this series extends, that leaves the door open for other people like an Austin Riley, for instance, to who's been really good this postseason to perhaps do something. But I think Eddie Rosario is the front runner.
So if the Astros end up winning tonight on Sunday night, do you think they have a good chance of winning games 6 and 7 back at home in Houston?
I think they do. They play well. The Astros play well at home, but it's just one game at a time. Whenever you have your back up against the wall like that, you take one game at a time. Houston's going to worry about Sunday night. And then if they win Sunday night, they'll worry about, I assume it would be Tuesday, and try to win that. And if not, and if they do, obviously it would be Wednesday. So it's just one game at a time for Houston. I don't really think they're worrying about getting back to Houston. They just want to win right now, and then they'll figure out the lineups, the rosters, the rotation for the next game.
Yeah, it seems like when the Astros have their backs against the wall, they do really good. I think it was last year they were down 3-0 against Tampa in the ALCS. And of course they didn't win, but they won 4, 5, and 6. So I don't know. I got a feeling that the Astros are at least going to force game 6. However, once this does come out, I'm going to probably look, like a fool because somehow the Braves are going to win this. But I really think Houston's going to be able to find some way to win this game. And the last few years, you always have to say you can't count out Houston. Like, I think this year people didn't expect Houston to go as far as they did. They thought maybe they would take a step back, and they didn't, of course. So I just got a feeling that Houston somehow is going to be able to win this and force a game 6. If the Astros win, we talked about, you think Alvarez will win the MVP for the Braves. if the Astros do end up winning this series and they end up forcing a Game 7 and win, who do you think is the MVP for them?
Yeah, so it would be Rosario for the Braves, and then for the Astros, I mean, Kyle Tucker, I like what I've seen from him this whole postseason. But then again, I think when it comes down to for the Astros to come back, they're going to have to rip off, 3 straight wins. So it would just be somebody who plays really well over the next 3 games. Right now, you can't necessarily say anyone is a front runner for Houston. Maybe Tucker, because he's just been consistent. But it would be whoever rips off a great 3 games, and I think it would be a hitter, obviously. It would be a hitter who's breaking out of a slump or someone who just goes bananas. So I can't really give a name right now, but I would say there's opportunity for anybody in that lineup.
What about a guy like Jose Altuve? He's had a pretty solid series, and I think he didn't win, of course, the last one the Astros won the World Series. He didn't, of course, win the he didn't win the World Series MVP. But what do you think about Jose Altuve's chances of winning the World Series MVP this year?
That's a very good point. I actually forgot about him for a second because I'm just so used to he's so good that you're just, Altuve hit another homer. He hit another homer. I think he has more than 20 playoff homers. He has a good chance too. But he's kind of one of those guys that you get like voter fatigue because you're so used to him being good. Like there's a bit of a novelty when you see someone like a Yordan Alvarez or a Kyle Tucker because they're newer, but it's like somebody like if it was Correa or Altuve, not to say that they can't win it, but we're just so used to seeing them doing well. But yeah, I definitely think Altuve could definitely be a very good option if he has a good series the rest of the way.
Yeah, you were mentioning that I think, he's second in his most homers in the playoffs. I think he's now at 23. I think I'm trying to remember who's in first. I can't remember who's in first, but whoever's in first has 29 homers. But I think it was on Saturday night that I think he now was in second because I think he had a homer on Saturday night. So he was now at 23 or something like that. It was either Friday or Saturday. I can't remember. But yeah, Jose Altuve, very good. And I feel like a lot of, as you mentioned, kind of they forget about him because he's, so good and all. But so let's now go from the World Series to the offseason. What do you think we'll see in the offseason? What do you think will be, or what teams do you think will be buyers and what teams do you think will be sellers?
That's a very good question. This is going to be an offseason like no other in baseball because there is a very real potential for a lockout this winter.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
The CBA is expiring, and as we saw last year with all of the bickering between the players and the owners before like the pandemic shortened season, those two sides don't like each other. They hardly agree on some very important topics. So there's a very good chance we have a lockout this winter. And there are, at the same time, there are also some very good players on the free agent market. I mean, the shortstop class, Corey Seager, Trevor Story. I'm missing some here, but there's a really good shortstop class. Could the New York Yankees, for instance, dip their hand into that pool because they have committed to playing Gleyber Torres at second base? So if you're playing Gleyber Torres at second base, you now have an opening at shortstop. Could they finally go out and make that big free agent splash on a position player, which we haven't seen them do ever since George Steinbrenner passed away over a decade ago? So that's something to keep an eye on. I think the Yankees will be a big player. Marcus Semien is on the free agent market. He recently, I think just a couple of days ago, hired Scott Boras. So that tells you he's looking for that bag. He's trying to get paid, and deservedly so. He had a monster season this year. So I think that's a big name we'll see, and he'll definitely stay at second base. He was a shortstop, and he can still play short, but I think that his bat profiles so well. Is just a prototypical second baseman. I think that he'll find a home there wherever he's going, and he'll get a lot of money for that. On the pitching side of things, you have guys like Scherzer, who is going to be on the market actually. Kershaw, it's like these really good veterans, but I don't necessarily think there's going to be like a bidding war. I feel like these guys know where they want to go, and likely, honestly, might re-sign with the teams they're at. I could see Scherzer staying with the Dodgers. Kershaw is likely going to stay with the Dodgers if I had to guess. But then you have the wild cards where you have a guy like Justin Verlander. Remember him? He's on the free agent market, and that's something that I think we should definitely keep an eye on. I'm going to talk a lot about that this offseason because Verlander is an interesting case because, of course, he's a Hall of Famer, but he's chasing some pretty big milestones, like some wins, total, for instance. he needs to be on a contender for that. There were some rumblings like saying, oh, should he go back to Detroit, to the Tigers? Because the Tigers have a really promising young core and they have a lot of money to spend now. But I see someone like Verlander going to a contender right away, one of the big contenders on the coast, and doing something like that. But he'll be on the market this winter.
That is interesting because I totally forgot about Justin Verlander. And of course, at one time he was the best pitcher, and I've just completely forgot about him. And of course, you mentioned the Yankees. I wouldn't be surprised, like I said, if they go out, because it seems like every year them and the Dodgers are the teams that ends up spending the most money. But recently, I saw this caught my eye, and I talked about it a little bit before, but Bob Melvin just got hired by the Padres. They got rid of Jay Stingler. They brought in Bob Melvin. Were you a little surprised because he was still under contract with the A's for 2022? How surprised were you on that hiring?
Yeah, I was extremely surprised. I mean, can you imagine being an Oakland A's fan and then waking up all of a sudden you don't have a manager? And you're just like, what did we even do? So I think what happened was the A's allowed him to take interviews. And he took interviews, and I guess he accepted the job with the Padres. But it's going to be a new experience for Bob Melvin because he's been given so little to work with over the years, and he's done so well with so little. So now that he's going to be with the Padres, where they have a lot more resources at their disposal, I'm really excited to see what he can do with that team, because I mean, he's taken the A's to the playoffs year after year. I mean, winning the AL West, 95, 97 wins, just consistently with really nothing. No offense to them, but like nothing. So going to San Diego, I think that'll be really good for both him and for the Padres.
I was surprised too, because, and the thing that even made me more surprised were the A's weren't going to, we're just going to let him go. Basically, they weren't going to get anything back from it, and I think it was only because they wanted to dump his $4 million salary, which that's not really a lot in terms of baseball contracts, but surprisingly, they just, and of course,
that's how Oakland operates.
Yeah.
It's funny. I mean, that's how Oakland operates. They don't want to pay anyone, even a manager. And when it's like $4 million out of your payroll in baseball, that's nothing. But I guess nobody's really above that payroll, or that luxury tax threshold, I should say.
Another hiring that recently happened, and of course, I'm a Cardinals fan. They end up letting go of Mike Schilt. Then they end up bringing in Oliver Marmol. What did you think about that hiring? He's only 35 years old. I think he's the youngest manager in baseball right now. What did you think about that hiring?
That was interesting. I would say the shocking part about that was the fact that they fired Mike Schilt.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
That was the shocking part, because Mike Schilt is as successful of a manager in today's game as we've seen. I mean, he's easily going to land on his feet, no doubt about that. But I think what happened, the rumors are that the Cardinals wanted to make some changes in-house to some of the coaches on Mike Schilt's staff, wanted to, replace them with people who were more on board with, newer school way of thinking. Mm-hmm. And Schilt went out and decided to stick up for his guys, and saying that, he wanted to keep his guys. So they decided to just kind of get rid of everyone, including Mike Schilt, which is crazy. I mean, you have a team that ripped off a 17-game win streak in September to make it to the playoffs, and you would think that your job is safe, but it's a tough business. But with with Oliver coming in, I think that it's going to be a new face. But honestly, to be honest with you, the fact that he's 35, he's probably just going to be getting marching orders from the front office. It's just going to be, they're going to be pushing stuff down. This is what you need to do. This is what the school of thought we want to follow. And he's going to just be managing the game a little bit, but most of the big decisions will be coming from the front office, at least in the beginning, in my opinion.
Yeah, I thought what I took away from the hiring or the firing of Schilt and the hiring of Oliver Marmol, it seems like Mozeliak wants a yes man, and I don't think Schilt was that type of guy. And I think, and here's what I think, if the St. Louis Cardinals make the playoffs this year and everything's fine, I think it looks all right on Mozeliak's part. But if they don't make the playoffs, it's going to look really bad on Mozeliak's part, because I feel like this is more of a big risk, low reward move, because, like I say, if the Cardinals make the playoffs, everything's fine. But if they don't make the playoff, it's going to look really bad, and you should just kept Schilt. And I just think that it's not really, I think it was kind of a bad decision, and it's going to look really bad if they don't make the playoffs. Now, if they make the playoffs, everything's fine, I guess. But it's just, and what I took away from it is a big risk, low reward, really. But I mean,
that's a very good way to put it, because if you look at, the Cardinals lost to the Dodgers, and there's no shame in that. They lost to them in a one-game wild card, a Chris Taylor walk-off home run. it happens. It happens. And then you lose Mike Shildt. So like you said, it's going to be bad optics if they don't succeed next year.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting too because I thought Shildt. I think there would be a lot of teams interesting in Shildt, and I think the A's now have a manager job. I think the Mets still have a job opening. Do you think Shildt will be hired before this season starts with another team?
I think so, definitely. You mentioned the Mets. The Mets have some problems of their own. They're having a difficulty getting people to interview for the president of baseball operations job, which is interesting. You would think that's a very coveted role, but I guess not with the Mets. People aren't necessarily interested in doing that job for the Mets. But I do think Mike Shildt will get hired before spring training.
It's not surprising that the Mets have that problem because they have a very interesting owner in Steve Cohen. And I feel like he's kind of an owner that sometimes sticks his foot in his mouth at times. And I can see why they have problems with hiring him. But, I mean, we'll see what they do. The Mets definitely, with Steve Cohen, I feel like he wants to spend money, unlike other Mets owners. Do you think the Mets will do anything this offseason? Because I think they have, two pitchers that are free agents at least. What do you think the Mets will do?
Yeah, that's true. They have Stroman is going to free agency and Syndergaard, I believe.
Okay.
I think Syndergaard's going to be a free agent as well. They'll make moves because Steve Cohen has shown that he wants to make moves. And like you said, he does stick his foot in his mouth, but they'll make moves. I don't know what the problem is with the Mets, honestly. Like, they've been a running joke for some time, but I kind of feel bad for them at this point because if we rewind to maybe 9 months ago, there was a lot of promise coming into the season. I was one of the people very high on the Mets, and it just seems every year, everything that can go wrong will go wrong with the New York Mets. And I think right now, the biggest concern they have is Jacob deGrom's health.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest concern they have. They shut him down, and he says he's healthy, but that's their pitching staff lies, and honestly, much of their franchise lies on his shoulders. So we'll see how that.
Yeah, they have a lot of talent. Of course, you said they have Jacob deGrom. They still have Carlos Carrasco, depending on his health and stuff. They have Francis Lindor, Pete Alonso. They got some talent around that team. I feel like they're kind of the little brother to the Yankees, and just because they were so bad for so long, I think that was kind of one of the reasons why they're running joke. But I think their bullpen was kind of the big problem last year, similar to the Padres. But I mean, we'll see what the Mets do this offseason. I mean, the division I feel like is still winnable despite having the Braves. We'll see what it seems like the Nationals every year. They're always in contention, but they can't quite get that back into the playoffs. But speaking of the Nationals, Bryce Harper had a great year, but they still haven't announced the MVPs, of course, and most likely the AL, it's going to be Ohtani for the Angels. But what about the NL MVP? That I feel like, and I think all the people that are in the running or all the players that are in the running didn't even make the playoffs. Who do you think actually wins the MVP on the National League side?
Very, very good question. Juan Soto from the Nationals, Bryce Harper from the Phillies, and Fernando Tatis from the Padres. Those are your three options. You can make a case for all of them. So I can run through each of them. So for Soto, you could say this is the best hitter in baseball. He's the best hitter in baseball, and he's the most feared presence at the plate between those three guys. For Tatis, you could say he's the most exciting player to watch, and he had the best season in aggregate. Like when you just look at everything, defense, even though his defense isn't great, I think it's better than Soto's really. So you look at defense plus offense and just look at his season in aggregate from start to finish. For Harper, for him, it's like, okay, clearly a leader on the team, clearly a winning attitude, and was just consistent all the way throughout. And honestly, he had an uptick to his end of the year, became a more feared hitter as the season went on and was really steady. And even though the Phillies, weren't in the playoffs, without him, it would have been even worse. It would have been even worse in Philadelphia. You can make an argument that the Padres, they missed Tatis for a few stints on the injured list, but it didn't really make that much of a difference because they had guys fill in his spot. So you could make the argument that Bryce on the Phillies, removing Bryce from the Phillies would be more impactful than removing Tatis from the Padres or removing Soto from the Nationals, because the Nationals weren't even good this year anyway. So that's the case for Bryce Harper. So there's a case for each of them. If you asked me this question mid-season, I was the biggest Tatis, like, oh yeah, Tatis. But the last 6 weeks of the season, it got interesting. And honestly, there's a very good chance that Bryce Harper wins this award. I'm currently leaning towards like the votes are already in, but I think that Bryce Harper will win. That's my guess, but what do I know?
Yeah. So if Jacob deGrom doesn't get hurt, the Mets might make the playoffs. I'm not sure exactly, but I think last time you came on, you said Jacob deGrom was the MVP at the time, and I think it was like in July. But if Jacob deGrom stays healthy, do you think he would have won the MVP?
If he had stayed healthy, I mean, I don't think so because he's a pitcher. I mean, last time I came on, yeah, I mean, he was having a like phenomenal year because of what he was doing with the bat as well. That was what was really special about it. I mean, he's probably going to win the Silver Slugger this year, and I think he hit above 300 and just crazy with the bat as well. But it's really hard for pitchers to win the award. It's been done, but you just have to be so much more dominant than others. Like we saw Shane Bieber win a pitcher's triple crown last year in a shortened season. Something like that is what we need to see over the course of a full season. But when the field is containing someone like, a Soto, Harper, Tatis, it's going to be tough. I don't think deGrom, even healthy, would have won it.
Okay. That makes sense. And yeah, it's kind of hard for pitchers to win the MVP. The last time we saw in the NL was Kershaw back in 2015 or 2016.
Yeah,
I think
Kershaw, Verlander.
Yeah, and Verlander won it back, 2010, 2011, sometime
11,
around there.
I think 11 or 2, yeah, something like that. 11.
So it's been a while. And of course, Ohtani is both a really good hitter and a really good pitcher, so that's why he's probably going to win on the American League side. But again, it's going to be interesting. I wish kind of they announced the league MVP or announced all the awards before the World Series, but it's all right. So again, thanks again for coming on, Deji. If you want to add anything else before we end the interview.
I have nothing to add. Just, you can follow me on Baseball Connection, Instagram, Twitter, Spotify for listening, Apple Music, Google Podcasts, all that good stuff, YouTube.
All right. Again, don't forget to subscribe to his YouTube channel. Check out his podcast, Baseball Connections. All right. Thanks again for coming on, Deji, and have a wonderful day and enjoy the rest of the World Series.
Thank you. You too.